If you are wondering what weapons you should be using, you're not alone. Season 14's weapon meta saw some massive changes, so let's rank every weapon in Apex Legends. However, I want to personally help make you a better player, and better yet, it is with the sponsor of today's video. If you are looking to improve your skills for your favorite games, the best way is to record your gameplay, and Outplayed is the easiest way for you to automatically do this. Once you download the app, you select the games you want Outplayed to automatically record from its 300+ game library, and you just let it do its thing. You even have the full customization to select the quality you want to record, and even what you want to record. You can record the entire match, and you don't need any extra editing software, as you can quickly edit everything right in Outplayed. You can share your content pretty much everywhere straight from the app, and this even includes Discord, which is important because for the duration of Season 14, I'm going to personally rate, give feedback, tips, and check out your clips in my Discord. Don't miss this one. Click the link in the description and pinned comment for more, and thanks to Outplayed for sponsoring this video. Most of the weapons in Apex are absolutely viable, but the only one getting a D tier spot this season is going to be the P2020. The P2020 actually can have some moments of brilliance, but for the most part, it's a pretty bad gun when it comes to the meta of Apex, and really, it's a transfer weapon, meaning you're going to drop it for basically any other weapon. It is worth mentioning that the P2020 is actually pretty solid in terms of damage per magazine, especially with the level 3 mag, but it still lacks the punch that you would get from something like an RE45 or any of the SMGs, really. If you do get hammer points on the P2020, it's more like a lower B tier gun, so if you are fortunate enough to get both of these relatively close together and early on in a match, then it's a pretty solid gun during the early game. Moving on, we do have the guns at a straight C tier, which are okay or fine for my list, and this starts with the Mozambique at a straight C tier. The Mozambique gets the slightly higher placement over the P2020, mainly due to its higher one-tap potential, as you're doing a little bit more damage per shot, with it being technically a shotgun. This means you're going to be more likely to finish an enemy after swapping to this gun with a single press of the trigger. Beyond this though, and if you are unaware, the Mozambique actually does have an insane amount of range compared to something like the EVA 8, which is cool, and it definitely gives it a slight unique type of feel. Similarly to the P20, I give the Mozambique a low to mid B tier rating if you do find hammer points, but in general, I'm also dropping the Beak for any other secondary shotgun or even an SMG. At a C plus here, we round the trio of hammer point weapons with the RE45. The RE is honestly a pretty misunderstood gun, and it's pretty solid if you are using it appropriately, but for the most part, the RE45 has a substantial slower fire rate than its SMG counterparts, and even though the DPS is pretty good with hammer points, it's not enough to make up for its fairly weak comparable performance against shielded enemies. The handling of the RE45 is my personal favorite part, and running this pistol with a sniper or a marksman feels pretty good to do. Much like the others, I give the RE45 an upper B tier rating if you do have hammer points, but in general, an R99 is going to be the better choice. Up next are a few B tier weapons, which are good guns, but also not the best out there. At a borderline C tier, we do have the Devotion LMG. The Devo used to be one of my most highly regarded weapons due to its sheer mag size and killing potential, but ever since its Season 13 nerf, the Devotion has not been the same. It still has moments of brilliance, but you need to be very close to enemies when you don't have the turbo, and I find the general feel of the Devotion being slower moving when it does come to strafing to be a pretty big problem in today's SMG or shotgun meta. If you do get a turbocharger, the Devotion can still be competent, and it's more like a low A tier weapon, but until then, it's semi-forgettable and borderline just fine. The first sniper rifle, if you can't even call it that, enters the list, and this is the charge rifle at a straight B tier. The charge rifle is actually very good at what it does, which is farming damage, and overall just a great poking weapon. The skull piercer coming back into the game, and the plentiful choices of marksman weapons does really hurt the charge rifle though right now. Sniper ammo though is more common than it ever has been in the past, but you'll need a pretty big backpack in order to not run out of ammo, and the general utility that the charge rifle lacks in terms of fighting power, I find to be the real problem. If you are playing a slower ranked game, the charge rifle is really great, and definitely don't sleep on it for some early to mid game damage and evo shield farming. Just be aware, you are probably going to have to swap this gun for something else during the late game. Second to the charge rifle is the L-Star, also at B tier. The L-Star saw a little buff this season, but in terms of its overall performance, it really remains mostly unchanged. It's a fine mid to close range hybrid weapon, but truthfully, basically most of the assault rifles are just better at doing what it does. If you are running an energy weapon like this, you'd be much better off running the Volt, seeing as the Volt can be very similar in terms of playstyle, while also having a much better time to kill and handling of an SMG. As much as I like to joke about the L-Star being pretty bad, as I have in past videos, it's actually a decent weapon that maybe has been a little forgotten about over the past couple seasons. At B+, we have our second sniper rifle, the Sentinel. The Sentinel for me is one of the most satisfying weapons to use use, but I have always been semi-hard on it due to it eating up your valuable need-to-have shield cells. This is even more so the case ever since they did nerf syringes and cells last season. I think the Sentinel is a good sniper, and if you are playing around with this specific longer range type of play or scout type of play, that it can do pretty well for you. I'll also say that if you do get the gold armor, that does make the Sentinel much more usable, but till then, the overall ease of use from a longbow or the much friendlier ammo and damage dealing of the 30-30 or the G7 are going to be better choices. The final B tier weapon is going to be the triple take. The triple take semi feels redundant for me at this point, and I'm probably like a broken record, but I think again, the 30-30 or the G7 are just much better when it does come to damage output. The triple take is similar to the charge rifle, where getting partial hits is very easy to do, and thus you can fairly easily use this gun with little to no focus on your aim. The triple take has been both better and worse, but I think it's landed in a good spot. If you need to split ammo types with your teammates, then this gun is definitely viable. The amazing weapons are up, and kicking off our A tier at A- is the Alternator SMG. The Alternator is still a solid gun, although it has lost some steam with the Volt coming back to the ground. Previously, the Alternator for me was my semi-hybrid SMG, and this somewhat was the case, but the Alternator still struggles in the time to kill aspect when comparing it with both SMGs and assault rifles. I think the Alternator is a great gun if you are still early on in a game, because the magazine size is very friendly for a no mag, and the damage per mag is pretty generous. The Alternator can still shine at times, but again, it just lacks a little bit in the time to kill area when we do look at its counterparts. The continual sleeper weapon on my list is the Hemlock assault rifle, also at A-. Much like the Alternator, it may not be the greatest in the time to kill area, nor as easy or fluid to use as a flatline, but the Hemlock is king when it comes to versatility. It truly can shine at all ranges, close range burst, mid-range burst, and long range tap firing, which makes it very good for a singular weapon. Heavy ammo is still pretty common, which is nice, and the boosted loader turning purple also is a nice plus this season. Some will love the Hemlock and others are going to hate it because again, it is a burst weapon, but in general, if you can look beyond this, the Hemlock is absolutely worthy of your time, and it's a great damage farming gun that rightfully deserves the sleeper weapon on my tier list. The third A- weapon is the longbow sniper rifle, and my preferred, I'll say, typical sniper rifle at the moment. The return of the skull piercer absolutely helps out the longbow, and this in conjunction with the slightly longer range meta we have this season means you're more likely to find sniper ammo in death boxes. That being said, I still think it's hard during the end game, and there are going to be slightly better options like the 30-30 or the G7 when it does come to being able to swap weapons if you have to. The longbow's damage per mag is honestly incredible, and if you do get a purple mag on this thing, the damage you can continually do is quite nice. Definitely do not sleep on the longbow. I also find that it's pretty solid in the close range if you are an accurate shooter. The return of the G7 Scout to the floor is our final A- weapon, and the G7 returning was absolutely welcomed, as for me personally, it never really felt like a proper care package gun. Having a mid to longer range type of light weapon is also nice when it comes to having other options to compete with the 30-30, the longbow, or of course the triple take. The G7, in my opinion, is the easiest to use of the scout and marksman class weapons, and anyone who wants a bit more range than something like the 301 with a little bit more accuracy is going to find that this thing is an absolute demon. I think if you are the type of player to run with anything that has a little bit more range, especially if you are in ranked Apex when range is a little bit more viable, this is probably your choice for an easy beamable weapon. This does roll us into the first A tier gun of the 30-30 repeater. This slightly edges out the G7 Scout, mainly due to the skull piercer and the buff the 30 received of always having the dual shell hop up now. A tier at times even feels like this is a little bit low for this gun, but I do find it to still struggle at slightly further mid ranges because it can be a little bit harder to use due to that bullet velocity being just a little bit slower. If you do master this gun though, it's absolutely incredible. Starting off with a near 100 damage heady and then quick taps is an incredible way to start an engagement for pushes and to create a lot of opportunities. Not to mention heavy ammo is nice, so swapping this gun for a car or a flatline at endgame is generally going to be an easy thing to do. The 30-30 is my premier longer range gun this season, so if you want to play it that way, I definitely would pick this thing up. This Spitfire falls a few spots for me this season, as it has had a few nerfs over the past season or two which have affected it slightly. It is still an incredible gun though, where you can dish out a serious amount of damage per magazine and really be an absolute menace, but this thing has to be used at a very specific range. Anything closer and you're just going to lose out to a lot of the other time to kill guns, and anything further you'd be better off with something a little bit more controllable and a little bit more reliable. I think the Spitfire turning to light ammo, while it was an odd change that I am still not used to seeing, it's more or less negligible and the gun performs similarly as it did before. If you are kind of just solo queuing, or if you're looking to take a lot of enemies on at once, or if you are absolutely just trying to farm the lobby, it definitely is not a bad pick as your mid-range assault rifle type of weapon, but you'll want something like a car or a Volt to back it up, so if you do get pushed, you're not going to be cut short with your time to kill. One weapon that does not shy away from that incredible time to kill is going to be the Prowler SMG. Hipfire across SMGs and assault rifles were nerfed, which does affect the base Prowler with no laser sight, but hopping this thing up with a purple laser sight makes the hipfire of the Prowler pretty nutty. Much like the Hemlock, it is going to be love it or hate it with the burst type, but anyone that can use the Prowler and really learns it well is going to have some big perks of using it. The biggest probably is its magazine size. Level 3 mag of 35 rounds on an SMG means taking on multiple enemies at once, and this in conjunction with the hipfire control really makes the Prowler feel like a run and gun warrior type of SMG. If you don't mind losing a little range or a little versatility when you do compare it to something like the Volt, then the Prowler is absolutely a worthy pick and maybe a little slept on. The Havoc assault rifle is our final A tier weapon, but let me just start by saying that if you do have a turbocharger, which is not always guaranteed, you absolutely can slot this weapon in the S tier. With a turbo, the 36 round purple mag Havoc is one of the fastest time to kill guns in the game, and having that amount of damage per mag that you can do simply just means not only are you going to kill enemies with blazing fast speeds, you can do it to multiple enemies at once. Without a turbo, I do find that the slight delay before firing to be a pretty big deal, and it will require a good sense of timing in order to not just end up dead. Don't forget, a lot of the guns in Apex have a time to kill that are right around the 1 to 1.25 seconds, so when we take a considerable amount of time just to start shooting the gun, even if it's a fraction of a second to charge the gun before you fire, it's kind of a big deal. I love the Havoc though. You need to be using this thing, especially if you get a turbo. Moving on to the borderline S tier weapons at A+, we start with the Wingman pistol. The Wingman has honestly never been in a more odd spot for me. It functions as it did last season, but the changes in ammo type feels pretty odd. It's a pistol, but not really because it has sniper ammo, but it's also not really a sniper because you can't use sniper optics, obviously. One big benefit always has been just how much damage you could output with 1 or 2 stacks of ammo, and the fact that you need more than double the amount of inventory space for similar results now is kind of a big deal. Regardless though, if you don't mind foregoing extra heals or grenades and you are running the Wingman, its overall killing potential is still very good, and anyone with an accurate shot with this gun really can just decimate the lobby. I have given it a lot of critiques that might sound like it's a bad weapon, but it's still an A+ amazing weapon that's borderline best in the game. We have a pair of weapons also at A+, and this is our premier secondary guns of the EVA 8 shotgun and the Peacekeeper shotgun. Both of these guns perform very differently, but each one have an extreme amount of viability depending on your playstyle and what you are looking to achieve. Let's start with the typical and previous reigning champion, the Peacekeeper. The PK is of course the go-to secondary for really anyone looking for the maximum amount of damage potential per hit, and I do think it's going to be great for really anyone looking to excel in a one-on-one. You'll never really need more than a single stack of shotgun ammo, which also will help quite a bit. Second to the PK though is the EVA 8, and rather than excelling in your one-on-ones, the EVA 8 is one of the best guns right now for anyone looking to dive in headfirst and take a straight 3-on-3 or maybe a 1-on-2 fight. The main reason is that the damage per magazine is somewhat similar to the PK, but it can dish out this entire magazine in nearly half the amount of time. The rapid burst damage the EVA brings to the table means being able to really change the flow of engagements, and you can just clutch up a little bit more. The EVA will probably require 2 stacks of ammo though, as running out is definitely possible if you aren't clean wiping squads. Both shotguns are incredible secondaries that in a tough bind can work as your primary to push in and take those fights. The final A+ weapon on my list is the tried and true R99 SMG. Maybe somewhat controversial, but the R99 is still an incredible laser beam weapon that has an incredible time to kill. It's also a borderline S tier gun, but I drop it into A tier for a few reasons, and the main reason being that there are just so many top tier contenders for this SMG right now and the fast time to kill slot. The R99 loses out to some of the other top guns mainly due to its damage per mag being fairly low if you don't have any extended mag, and it lacks some of the range that the other options do have. It definitely is easier to use than say the car SMG, so if you are looking for an easier fast time to kill gun, then this thing is going to be it. Definitely don't sleep on the R99. It seems weird to say that. It's a very good gun if you are running and gunning. It just lacks in a couple of the areas, which knocks it down a peg or two on my list. The care package guns are always weird to place, but this season the Rampage is now in the care package, which I think is a fine choice. I do wish they adjusted it slightly so you don't always have to use a thermite though. If it had a softer type of damage buff or fire rate buff, but then it was always charged up, this thing would be more viable for a care package gun. Getting one thermite with the package is cool, but swapping and having to drop things just to pick up that thermite feels really odd. And once it's gone, which definitely hurts its overall power. For what it is right now, I put it at a solid A tier. Second to this is the Bocek. This thing feels like a very good care package weapon, and since it's the only arrow weapon in the game, it just makes a little bit more sense. I've always thought that they were priming the Bocek for a care package weapon, although I don't really think they thought it would take about 6 or so seasons. The Bocek is probably a soft A+ to S- weapon for me, and I do enjoy using the Bocek if I am able to get it earlier on in games. I think the greatest strength of the Bocek is probably its overall poking power, seeing as you can do this quickly and effortlessly, not to mention it's semi-silent, which helps a little bit with getting damage out there and really just turning enemies' heads. The Kraber got nerfed last season, and I still really don't know how I feel about this weapon. I think the Kraber is still amazing, but not being able to one-shot someone depending on their armor rarity and helmet type kind of just makes it a detriment during the late game. I think if you aren't per se at the very end of a game, it's an S tier weapon, but anything beyond like ring 3 or ring 4, you might have a hard time using this weapon, as you'll need to swap for something else later on, or if a close range fight happens. It used to be the clutch up maker and sick playmaker, but hitting someone in the head for 190 damage and then they just plaster you with a Volt, it feels pretty bad. The Kraber feels more like a souped up Sentinel, and I give it an A+ or so for general play. The final care package weapon is the massive shotgun, and for me, even with the removal of the dual shell hop up, this is the best gun in the game right now. Being able to nearly 2-tap any enemy is too good, and this thing is one of those guns where if I hear it being shot or if I know an enemy has one, I am absolutely just staying away from them as much as I possibly can. The Mastiff is the only care package weapon that for me is an instant pickup right now, and I'll feel pretty confident going into any end game with this weapon. If you are enjoying the video or if you just want to support me, hit that like button. Also, never play with random players. Hop to my community Discord. I would love to have you in there, and you can chat with myself, the community, and of course, I can review your clips and highlights as well. The best of the best guns in the game are up at S tier. We start off at S- with the Car SMG. The Car SMG saw the removal of the barrel stabilizer, and it actually also saw the removal of that slot as a whole, because the Car cannot take laser sights either, which means it did just straight up receive a pretty big hipfire nerf. The Car though is still a beaming weapon with a very good base damage per mag size, which means more one-magging enemies off spawn than the R99, and even though the barrel stabilizer is gone, the Car SMG still excels at being the dominant close range weapon. The hybrid of either light or heavy ammo and magazines is also pretty broken, and it means finding ammo or getting its killing power kitted out a little bit faster is going to be much easier than that R99 and its other counterparts. Definitely do not sleep on the Car SMG. It seems like it did get a pretty big nerf, but in reality, the gun is still insane. The VK47 or the Flatline is up next at a straight S tier. The Flatline continues to be one of the dominant weapons in Apex Legends, where those that learn the recoil and learn it well are going to be well rewarded. It does lose out slightly to the 301 in terms of its time to kill, but it has the benefit of being the harder hitting and having a bigger level 3 mag size, which again means more damage per mag. The Flatline in my eyes is kind of the gun to use if you're trying to be very competitive or if you are going in solo versus squads. Nothing really bad to say about the Flatline. It's been dominant for ages, and it's going to continue to do so. It's also worth mentioning that the Flatline actually excels a little bit if you get that level 1 gray mag, because you're getting 5 bullets to the mag rather than the 301, which is only getting 2 extra bullets for that level 1 magazine. Every season I try to put 2 weapons at the S+ tier, or maybe God tier as some like to call it, and this season is no exception. We unsurprisingly have the R301 carbine rocking one of these top slots. The R301 is the best gun to use, not only for an incredible time to kill, but it also has very good range. And if you are brand new to Apex Legends and you're just looking for that weapon that is easy to use, the 301 is that gun. It is forgiving and is kind of that gun that is very familiar to other shooters as well, which again makes it a very easy pickup. Since it is probably the most common weapon being used, it's also going to be one of the easiest to get fully kitted and continue to find ammo for as well. 301 Legends has been in full effect for quite a number of seasons now, probably about 2 or so years, maybe even since the game first came out, and I expect this thing to remain the same way for quite some time. And rocking in the last but certainly not least is the return of the Volt SMG, as it has come back to the floor. There are a few very specific things with the Volt though that makes it even a little bit better than maybe it used to be when it was on the ground. Much like the other SMGs, the Volt did see the removal of the barrel stabilizers for laser sights, and this does help with its close range hip fire power, which probably was not really needed if we're being honest. If anything, the Volt was always the SMG that had a minimal amount of recoil and was pretty easy to control, and having no barrel barrel stabilizer really was not a problem at all. So removing this and then improving the hipfire via a laser sight is kind of just a straight buff to the Volt from what it used to be. The Volt with the 2x bruiser or a 1 to 2x optic is also a great thing to run, as the less recoil from this SMG makes it pretty manageable at range, and the Volt in a lot of scenarios can't just replace your assault rifle, but also be very good at the very close range. The Volt is no doubt one of those weapons that if you're not using, you're kind of just hurting your chances at winning. But that being said, you probably should watch this video right here so you can master your movement and your fighting capabilities. Happy gaming, legends.